Hey guys, welcome to my Week 7 recap of college football. Today I'll be talking about different things that happened this week and letting you in on everything that's been going on. Starting off with the first topic of the video, my favorite game of the week. I'm going to talk about Oregon versus Washington. It was a very fun game. Both quarterbacks played a really spectacular game. There's some questionable calls near the end, which I'll get to in a little bit, but I want to start off with saying Bo Nix, he had 337 passing yards. He was 33 for 44 and had 2 TDs. Played a spectacular game, even though they came up short, 33-36. The Ducks lost that game. They probably could have easily won that game, but that's what happens when you play a good team. Really can go in either way when two teams that are elite teams play each other. Michael Penix also had a spectacular game. He threw for 302 pass yards, was 22 for 37, and had 4 touchdown passes. Doomsday, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I should have made sure I pronounced his name right. But the receiver, Washington's receiver, he is so good. I'm impressed by him. Him and Troy Franklin, they're really good receivers. Some of the best receivers in college football. It was fun seeing them make some of the plays they did. Definitely Doomsday. He had a great game. The Ducks outgained Washington, and it looked like they're going to win this game, but it really came down to some questionable calls. Dan Lanning, he was getting a lot of hate. I get it. He gets a little bit of criticism, but he's still a good coach. He's done a lot for Oregon. He was the freaking defensive coordinator for Georgia a few years ago, and that's saying something. That team was spectacular, and they still are. But they were 0 for 3 on 4th downs. If they convert one of those 4th downs, the Ducks would probably win the game. But you could also say if they kick the field goal before halftime, they might win that game too if it goes into overtime. There's a lot of what ifs, but the fact of the matter is, I'm not going to criticize Dan Lanning too much because, stuff happens in college football, and when you play in a high offense, a top offense like Washington. On that last drive Oregon had, 4th and 3, in their own territory, close to the 50-yard line, I think it was the right call. Because, even if they didn't get it, which they didn't get it, Washington scored really quick. And if they punched the ball away, Washington would have had an easy shot of driving down the field and scoring because Washington's offense was spectacular. Oregon literally could have just converted that 4th down and they win the game. And it was an offensive game for the most part. There were some good defensive plays, but I'm not going to criticize Dan Lanning too much. I feel like he was getting too much hate. I've seen somebody say that he should get fired for what he did. That was probably just a troll, but it is what it is. It's not no Mario Cristobal freaking having his running back run the ball when all they need to do is take a knee, but hopefully you get my point. We could see a rematch, definitely in the Pac-12 championship. I think it's highly likely Oregon could possibly win out if they don't slip up. I'm a little scared about that game against Utah. Personally, I am actually an Oregon fan, so hopefully I'm not too biased. I'm an Oregon fan, but I'm scared of playing Utah, even though they haven't looked great on offense this year, because we're playing at Utah, and that's always a tough place to play. Washington State, I think we'll handle them, but that will be a tough one. USC, they have a pretty bad defense, but it's still a slip-up game that we could have, and definitely Oregon State. The way Oregon State plays, I feel like they could control that game, make Oregon play a different play style that they don't want to play. But I really hope we can win out. And for Washington, same thing for them. I hope they win out too. I'm rooting for the Pac-12. I'm rooting for Washington because I want them to go 12-0. Now, what happens if Washington goes 12-0 and the Ducks go 11-1? Would there be a scenario where if the Ducks beat Washington in the Pac-12 championship, would they both get in? I think it's possible. If they've done it with the SEC before, and the SEC's, it's always been a top conference, and this year the Pac-12's getting more love, so I could see the Pac-12 getting 2 teams in more likely than other conferences. The Big Ten, I could see the Big Ten getting 2 teams, definitely. But I don't know, it's hard to say because there's a lot of teams who could go undefeated. You got Michigan, Georgia, Florida State, the ACC, Big Ten, SEC. Likely, they might all go undefeated. So that would leave it where 2 Pac-12 12-1 teams can't get in. The Pac-12 championship winner would get in, unless Oklahoma somehow goes undefeated. But I don't know. It's hard to say. There's going to be some chaos with the playoff committee because there's a lot of good teams this year, but there's no team that really stands out from any other being the most dominant team in the country right now. And it's kind of exciting to see that we don't have that. It's going to be an exciting year. And let me get on to my next topic, which is going to be my shocker of the week. The game that I was most shocked about. Damn, I don't even freaking. I was really shocked when I seen this. I shouldn't have been shocked because Arizona was due for a win. I'm talking about Arizona, Washington State. Arizona heading on the road to Washington State and stomping the shit out of Washington State, 44-6. Washington State scored the first touchdown of the game, and they got their extra point blocked, and then they didn't score a single point after that. Arizona scored 44 unanswered. Arizona had 5 rushing touchdowns and scored 44 unanswered points. Arizona's quarterback had a pretty good game, throwing for 342 yards. Arizona also forced 3 turnovers and put Cam Ward under a lot of pressure. He was running away a lot in that game. Arizona really won this game because they exposed how bad Washington State's pass defense is, and Arizona really showed up to play. Arizona is not a bad team. Like, a lot of people are saying, oh, Washington, they're overrated. USC is overrated. Well, USC is overrated, but we'll get to that later. But they were one possession game with Washington and USC. Washington was kind of underwhelmed or overwhelmed in that game. I mean, I didn't feel like Washington really played what they were capable of. They were kind of just sleepwalking through that game. But still, Arizona, 2 one-possession games back-to-back against top 10 teams. And they finally break through and they destroyed Arizona. Or Arizona destroys Washington State. It was a good win for them, 44-6. They are now over 50 on the win column. They're 4-3. Arizona really needed this win. The last 2 weeks, they almost pulled off upsets, but they got it done this week. On to my next topic, and this is a big one. My 7 takeaways from week 7. Gotta start off with number 1. My first takeaway: Georgia is unpredictable. I say Georgia's unpredictable because, I mean, they've been slipping away in games all year. South Carolina, Auburn, they didn't cover a spread through their first 5 games. They didn't look like Georgia from last year or the year before. So even they haven't looked like a good Georgia. They haven't looked like Georgia has been looking in a while. I don't know what I'm saying, but Georgia, they're not looking the same this year. I'll say that. But that win against Kentucky, I mean, that proved a lot of doubters wrong. Maybe Georgia's back, 51-13. Then they played Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt had a chance to make it a one-possession game in the fourth quarter. But Georgia ultimately they won 37-20. I mean, a win's a win. Brock Bowers got hurt, so I don't know if Georgia's going to be in the national championship this year. Are they even going to be in the playoffs? I think they'll be in the playoffs because they don't really play anybody. But my question is, the more as the season goes by, I'm going to be looking at that Georgia and Alabama game because I could see that game going either way. But Georgia, very unpredictable, but they're still the number 1 team in the nation. They're still undefeated. They still have a big win streak. So I can't hate them too much, but they just do not look like the number 1 team. On to my second takeaway, Utah and Oregon State. Don't count them out in the Pac-12. Maybe not Pac-12 championship contenders. Well, actually, I take that back. Oregon State, they could easily be in the Pac-12 championship with their schedule. Utah and Oregon State, Oregon State, they could not easily, but they could upset Oregon and Washington. They have looked good. They have 1 loss to Washington State, and they had a very bad first half in that game. I feel like Oregon State, if they had a rematch, Oregon State would win that game. They just got a little bit exposed in their pass defense. But Oregon State, they have a chance to be 9-1. It's a pretty good chance. They have a chance to be 9-1 going into their last 2 games against Oregon and Washington. I think their last 2 games are Oregon and Washington. I don't think I'm mistaken. I think I'm right about that. But if Oregon State wins one of those games, there's a chance, definitely against Oregon, because Oregon already has 1 loss in the Pac-12. There's a chance Oregon State could take the Pac-12 championship spot over Oregon, which I would not want to see. But there's a chance. And Utah, I know they have a terrible offense, and they really, there's a lot of questions. They don't have their quarterback. I don't think he's coming back. They're probably just going to redshirt him. Cam Rising would help out a lot, but there's also questions about him coming back because would he play 100%? Would he be rusty? Who knows? But Utah, the game against Cal, I was a little impressed by their offense, actually. They ran the ball a lot better, and if they can keep improving on the offensive side, they can really compete. They have a home game against Oregon in 2 weeks, and it's really a trap game for Oregon. I don't think anybody's looking at the game that way, but Oregon's known for upsetting games against Utah, and they're known for upsetting games in general. But Utah, I still think they're in the conversation in the Pac-12 for upsetting some teams. I mean, you could say the same for Washington State and UCLA, or really anybody in the Pac-12, honestly. Not Stanford and Arizona State, but Pac-12 is a pretty good conference. But I mentioned Utah and Oregon State mainly because they looked better than UCLA, Washington State. And I'm not mentioning USC because everybody knows they're already a contender in the Pac-12, but I'll talk more about them. That's why I didn't put them in this takeaway. My third takeaway, Penn State, they basically have their freaking third bye week going into their big game against Ohio State. They played Northwestern in a very underwhelming game. Then they had a bye week. And then last week they played UMass. Like halfway through the season, Penn State's playing UMass. They played nobody. I mean, they played a ranked Iowa. They beat him 31-0. I guess that's kind of impressive. But 3 bye weeks going into their game against Ohio State. A lot of people may be saying, "Oh, that's gonna help them out a lot. They're gonna go into that game and they're gonna win that game." I don't know. I think it's gonna be a good battle, but I think having 3 bye weeks like that, they're not necessarily 3 bye weeks, but that's kind of what it is. Not playing anybody for 3 weeks, that might hurt Penn State, honestly. It might really hurt them, but it's only time will tell. We'll see how Penn State plays against Ohio State. And on to my fourth takeaway. I'm going to talk about Louisville. Louisville is exactly what I thought they were. And I'm saying this because I thought they were going to get beat by Notre Dame like 2 or 3 touchdowns. I looked at some of their games, some of their scores, watched them play against NC State. They did not look like a great team. They just looked like they had a couple close games that they pulled away in. And they had their Super Bowl. Like, Louisville played their best game in that game, and Notre Dame didn't play so great. Louisville beat them by 2 touchdowns. It should have been 3. But Louisville comes back next week. They're all hyped up. They're ranked top 15, and of course, they lose to Pitt, freaking 38-20, I think it was. Like, what is going on, Louisville? You got all this hype. I should have known better. I really should have known Louisville, because I got a little bit on Louisville's side after they beat Notre Dame. Like, I gotta stop disrespecting this team, but I should have known better. Louisville, they're overrated. The scores don't lie. The stats don't lie. I mean, good win against Notre Dame, but Notre Dame was they had a lot of games before Louisville that were tough, and they were just, what's the word I'm looking for? They were, I can't find the word. They're tired from the last couple games, but Notre Dame was kind of sloppy in that game. But on to my next takeaway. My fifth takeaway, North Carolina is legit. Now, a lot of people, they've been saying, "Oh, North Carolina, they're overrated. They're going to take their first loss. They thought they were going to lose to Pitt. They thought they were going to lose last week." I mean, people keep thinking North Carolina is going to slip up, but I think North Carolina is starting to prove themselves. They're not the same team they were years ago. Are they going to make the playoffs? Probably not, but who knows? North Carolina is legit, and they are ACC title contenders. And they probably will be in the ACC championship, 11-1, 12-0, going up against Florida State. So I don't think they'll make it in the playoffs with 1 loss as a ACC championship team because of how good the teams are this year and how many teams are going to have good records. This year would be perfect for a 12-team playoff. It really would be. But North Carolina is legit. That's my 5th takeaway. On to my 6th takeaway. Alabama might be able to make the playoffs. And I know they hardly beat Arkansas. They've looked kind of bad, but they keep getting better. And if they can beat Tennessee and LSU, I know those are 2 games they have circled because they lost to both of those teams last year. If Alabama can beat those 2 teams, they can win out and they have Georgia in the SEC championship. That game is winnable. By the way it looks like right now, Alabama does not look that much worse than Georgia. Georgia does not look like a freaking top 3 team even. I don't even have them in my top 3, which I'll get to later. Not in this video, but in another video, if I can make my other video in a couple days. My preview of Week 8, so tune in for that. Hopefully I'll have it out. I'm going to start trying to post more regularly, like twice a week. Just started my YouTube channel, figuring some stuff out, but yeah, my 6th takeaway, Alabama, they might be able to make the playoffs, and I think there's a big chance. So we'll see what they can do against Tennessee. Jalen Milroe's getting better. They got a really good defense. The pass and run game, they can rely on both of them. But at first, they were more of a run team, but they've been passing the ball a little bit more. But, yep. On to my 2nd takeaway. Or, my bad, 7th takeaway. I think I said 2nd takeaway. On to my 7th takeaway. USC is overrated. I haven't talked much about USC yet because I had this takeaway. No. I went with USC to beat Notre Dame in a close game. I thought USC would take advantage of Notre Dame's bad offense and outscore them. I was thinking it was going to be in the 30s, but none of the teams were in the 30s. Notre Dame beat them 48-20. I mean, I should have seen this coming. That defense is so bad, it's actually crazy. And I was saying this, if USC has one bad game on offense, like if they have a couple bad plays on offense, something goes wrong, Caleb Williams makes a bad play, which is very rare, but when you're playing against a good defense, it can happen, and it did happen. He threw 3 interceptions. Then in that case, USC is not going to have a chance. Because, I mean, if you're not going to score on offense, your defense is going to give up 30, 40, 50 points, however many points they give up. Just depends on the team you're playing. Notre Dame's not even a great offense, and they scored 48 on USC. USC's defense is atrocious. It's so bad. Like, I don't understand. Like, Lincoln Riley, he was the head coach for Oklahoma too, and they had a terrible defense. They really need to figure something out. Lincoln Riley needs to figure something out because, the defense has talents. They have freaking 4- and 5-star recruits, but their defense, it's trash. And if USC wants to compete in the Pac-12, which is going to be very hard to do because Oregon and Washington are legit teams, they're going to have to score a lot. And that's going to be hard to do consistently without, you cannot miss a drive. You miss one drive, the momentum's terrible. Like, if you don't score a touchdown on one drive, you throw an interception, your defense can't hold up. You're going to get down 14-0 quick. But, yeah. On to my next topic, my top 25 rankings. Don't mind me just blowing a bug off my phone. Alright, my top 25 rankings. So I'm going to start with number 25 from the bottom. I got James Madison at number 25. I'm not sure if this is the right choice, but they beat a pretty good 4-1 Georgia Southern team pretty easily this week, and they're still undefeated, so why not rank them 25? I don't know who else to rank 25. And at 24, I have Missouri. I don't have them ranked higher because I don't think they're a top 20 team. They had a good win against Kentucky this week. Their offense is looking pretty good. They have a good game against South Carolina that will test them this week. I could see them on upset alert. They are on upset alert. They definitely are on upset alert. I could see them losing that game. Number 23, I got Louisville. I have to rank Louisville in the top 25 because of that Notre Dame win. Being beat by Pitt by 17 after getting a big win is kind of embarrassing, though. But that's why I don't have them ranked any higher. Some people probably have them in the top 20, but they have not looked impressive. They have one impressive game, and it was basically their Super Bowl. They're not going to play like that again. They're not. Number 22, Tulane. They have a pretty good win this year, or they have a pretty good schedule this year for a Group of 5 team. They have one loss to Ole Miss, and their quarterback was hurt in that game. They're 5-1, so they definitely deserve a top 25 spot. I do not think they're the best Group of 5 team. We'll get to the team that I think is the best Group of 5 team in a little bit. By the way, it's on these top 25 rankings. I'm not ranking them off of like. I basically rank them off who I actually think the best teams in college football are, wins and losses aside. But on to my 21st team, an example of what I just said is Clemson. They're 21 for me. Like a lot of people don't have them in their top 25, but Clemson still is a really good team. They've had a tough schedule. I know Clemson struggled a bit against Wake Forest and still has 2 losses, but I still think this team is one of the 25 best teams in college football. They kind of had a fluke win or fluke loss against Duke. I think if they play again, Clemson would be in that game. They would probably win it. It'd be close. I don't know if they'd win it. It'd be close. Duke's a good team too. But number 20, I have Air Force. It's time to give this team more respect. They will probably be in a New Year's Six Bowl, and I think they have a chance to go 12-0, if not 11-1, into the conference championship, which they will probably win. But the Mountain West is pretty good this year. You got Air Force, Fresno State, Wyoming, and UNLV. They have only one loss, which is to Michigan. But I mean, there's still some questions about UNLV. I don't know how good they actually are because they've never really been on top of the Mountain West. But we'll see. The Mountain West is looking good though. Number 19, I have LSU. They have 2 losses on the season, but they still have looked decent, even though they have been unpredictable. But they will be tested against Bama in a couple weeks. I like LSU, other than their defense. I mean, they're kind of inconsistent. I think they deserve the 19 spot. And 18, I have USC. It was a toss-up between LSU and USC for this spot. But I do think USC is better than LSU because of Caleb Williams. They did not look like a good team against Notre Dame, though. I knew if their offense had struggles, they would easily lose that game. And I'm afraid if they don't score 30 against Utah, they won't win the game this week either. But on to my next team, number 17, Utah. I have them above USC. I don't know why, I just do. I don't think Utah will beat USC. I think this is a bounce back game for USC this week, but I think I should give Utah a little more respect after their dominant win against Cal. A lot of people thought it was going to be close, but Utah surprisingly ran the ball super well along with playing defense that like they have been all season. Their defense is really good. Number 16, I got Duke. I still have Duke ranked kind of high because they're still a good team with a very good defense. It'll be another big test against Florida State. I don't think Florida State's going to blow Duke out. I think the spread's a little high. But, I mean, maybe it's the right spread. We'll see. Number 15, Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss at 15. I think it's only right to rank Ole Miss in the top 15, being their only losses to Bama. Ole Miss still looks like a pretty good team, and I'm excited to see what they can do this year. They got a test against Auburn, at Auburn, kind of a trap game. I could see Auburn beating them. Will they beat them? I don't know. But on to my next team, 14, I have Tennessee. They had a brutal, freaking, very boring game against Texas A&M. It was kind of funny how those offenses played. It was so bad, but this weekend, I think they proved themselves on the defensive side. Their defense is very well improved. It will be interesting to see what they can do against Bama and Georgia this year. At 13, I have Oregon State. This team has looked really good, and they could be 7-0 right now. They had a tough loss to Washington State where they had a terrible first half, which I talked about earlier. I like Oregon State's style of play. They're a line of scrimmage team. I mean, they could run the ball super well and take up time. I think it will keep them in games with Oregon and Washington. They can run the ball really well. Still some questions on the defensive secondary, though, because they're up and down on defense. Sometimes they play really well on defense, sometimes they don't. Number 12, I have Notre Dame. A lot of people probably don't agree, but Notre Dame has a tough schedule, and they looked pretty good outside the Louisville game. That was basically Louisville's Super Bowl, which I've talked about. I think Notre Dame is definitely better than Louisville. Louisville played their best game, and Notre Dame played their worst game in that game. Number 11, I have Alabama. They have looked pretty good, but still show some weakness within the offensive line. But their defense is really good, and they run the ball well. And they're starting to pass well, too. Alabama, are they still a top team like they usually are? Not counting last year, because they kind of were off last year. The last 2 years, they kind of fell off. They're not like a top 14, but they're still like a top 10-ish team. but can Alabama get back in it? Number 10, North Carolina. I think I finally respect this team. Their offense has looked a lot better. Their defense isn't bad either. They have an amazing quarterback and a pretty good coach. He's pretty old, too. No disrespect. Actually, I like their coach. We'll probably see them against Florida State in the ACC Championship, which I talked about earlier. That game could be a big deciding factor for who's in the ACC playoffs or who isn't. Number 9, I have Oregon. Similar to Texas, which I'll get to next, I still think they're a top 10 team and came up short and probably should have won the game against Washington. They will most likely get their rematch in the Pac-12 championship game also. Number 8, I have Texas. I think Texas still deserves the top 10 spot because they still have a win against Alabama and have looked pretty good. They came up short against Oklahoma. They will most likely have a rematch in the Big 12 championship game. Number 7, I have Penn State. It's hard to say how good Penn State actually is because they haven't played anybody, but they still have a shutout win against Iowa, putting up 31 points and scoring a lot in games. Iowa's 6-1 right now and ranked. I mean, this weekend is the big test for Penn State, so we'll see what they can do. It's going to be a great game. I'm assuming it's going to be low 20s, maybe high 20s if they score a little bit. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. It's going to be really close, and I think a lot of people expect that. Number 6, I have Florida State. Florida State has looked pretty good, and they're getting a lot better, too. They have one terrible game against Boston College. I mean, I don't know what happened in that game. But they also have two decent wins over Clemson and LSU. Clemson and LSU, they're not bad teams. They're pretty decent teams, and that's still kind of impressive. Number 5, I have Georgia. There's still so many questions about this team, but they keep winning. I just can't rank them number 1 off of this tier or even top 4. Because there's just so many questions. Like, I don't know about this team. They're up and down. Like, I'm not really gonna start. Like, I'm not gonna be sure about them until they play Tennessee and Ole Miss. And even then, am I gonna be sure about them? I don't think anybody's sure about them right now. But we'll just have to wait and see. Number 4, I have Washington. Still some questions on the defensive side. Can they compete with the best teams? Well, their defense isn't terrible. It's just not elite defense. But their offense is amazing that I think they can be in the playoffs and compete with teams. They might be the best team in the country. Who knows? They definitely have the best offense in the country. They had a good win against Oregon this week, too. So, Washington and Oregon, definitely the two best teams in the Pac-12. And I'd like to see that rematch in the Pac-12 championship. It was a fun game, even though my team lost. Number 3, I got Oklahoma. Oklahoma, they had that big win over Texas, and they looked like a very improved team from last year. Their defense is playing well, and their offense is playing well. They can make big plays, too. I remember that stop at the 1-yard line. Don't forget about that. Oklahoma, they're a tough team this year. Number 2, I got Ohio State. They have a big win over Notre Dame, along with looking pretty dominant each week. I have Ohio State at 2. I know they still have some questions on the offensive line, but they look dominant against Purdue. They looked dominant against the team they played last week. I forgot who they played, but I watched the game. They looked pretty dominant. They had that good win against Notre Dame, and if I thought Notre Dame wasn't a top 15 or top 20 team, then I probably wouldn't have Ohio State this high, but I think that's a really good win for Ohio State, definitely going to Notre Dame. It was a tough game for them, and they won it. And number 1, Michigan, the only team that deserves the number 1 spot in my eyes. I know they haven't had a big win, but they're the only team that has looked superior to every other team. Their last 3 and 4 games, they've held the team to 7 points. I know they haven't been playing anybody, but compared to Georgia, they're way better. I know you can make the case for Ohio State. If you're going to rank Michigan 1, why not rank Ohio State 1? Because Ohio State's actually played a team. But Michigan, they look like they have a very good offense and a very good defense. They look very good on both sides of the ball. That's why I have them number 1. I know they haven't been tested, but I'm excited to see what they can do. And on to my next topic, I'm going to just be ranking the AP Top 25 from this week. I'm just going to go through it quick, not talk about the teams because I already talked about teams, but this is what the AP ranked the top 25. Number 25, UCLA. Number 24, Iowa. Number 23, Tulane. Number 22, Air Force. Number 21, Louisville. Number 20, Missouri. Number 19, LSU. Number 18, USC. Number 17, Tennessee. Number 16, Duke. Number 15, Notre Dame. 14, Utah. 13, Ole Miss. 12, Oregon State. 11, Alabama. 10, North Carolina. 9, Oregon. 8, Texas. 7, Penn State. 6, Oklahoma. 5, Washington. 4, Florida State. 3, Ohio State. 2, Michigan. And number 1 is Georgia. And on to my last topic of the video. I'm going to be talking about my playoff contenders. Now, I made a video like this 2 weeks ago. I was going to make a video last week, but I didn't. But last week I had USC on my playoff contenders. I had 11 playoff contenders. Let me count that. Yeah, 11 playoff contenders, and I still have 11 playoff contenders. The only difference is I took USC off and I put North Carolina on it. So right now, my playoff contenders, I'm kind of ranking them in order on who I think has the most likely chances to make the playoffs. So my first playoff contender, Georgia. I know I was just talking crap about them, but they don't play anybody outside Ole Miss and Tennessee. And even if they lose in the SEC championship to Alabama and they're 12-1, I don't see the committee leaving Georgia out of the playoffs just because of them being 12-0 and also the last 2 years how good they've been. Unless they actually do. I mean, what happens if Florida State, Michigan, Washington goes undefeated and Alabama wins that game? I mean, who knows? But still, I think Georgia has the most likely chances. And at number 2, I have Florida State. They definitely have a big chance to win out. Even with one loss, if they have one loss, there's a chance that they won't get in. But there's also a chance they could get in. But it looks like Florida State could possibly win out. So I have them as my second contender. Number 3, I have Michigan. I think they're the best team in the Big Ten. As of looking at it right now, I mean, I might be wrong. There's a high chance that I will be wrong because these teams, they're Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, they're similar, but they haven't played each other yet. But Michigan's my 3rd playoff contender. Ohio State is my 4th playoff contender. And at number 5, my 5th playoff contender, I put Washington a little higher. I think it's going to be hard for a Pac-12 team to get in the playoffs, but Washington's getting closer. They have that win against Oregon, and even if they win out and lose to Oregon, I think there's a high chance they can be in the playoffs. I think it's a 50-50 if Washington loses to Oregon. It depends on what other teams do, so we'll have to wait and see. My 6th playoff contender, I have Oklahoma. I kind of flip-flopped between Oklahoma and Texas because I do think Texas can win that rematch, but Oklahoma beat them the first time. I got to put Oklahoma over Texas for playoff contenders. And there's a small chance Oklahoma and Texas both make it in the playoffs. If Texas wins out and beats Oklahoma, and Oklahoma wins out, losing the Big 12 championship, both being 12-1, just like Oregon and Washington. But there'd need to be a little bit of chaos. Florida State would have to lose. A Big Ten, you'd have to have a little bit of chaos in the Big Ten. I mean, there's stuff that needs to happen. And Texas, they're my 7th contender. I just kind of talked about them, so I'm not going to talk about them much. My 8th contender is Oregon. I still think Oregon's a playoff contender. They have a pretty good defense. And Dan Lanning, he's a good coach. I don't get the hate. I mean, I get the criticism, but a lot of people are hating for the calls he made. But it's college football. Sometimes you got to make calls. As long as you're not choosing to run the ball when all you have to do is kneel. Mario Cristobal. Not bad. Number 9, Penn State. I thought about ranking them higher. I probably should have. Just because... Actually, I probably shouldn't have. I think I have Penn State in the right spot. It's just kind of weird because I have them pretty far behind Michigan, Ohio State as playoff contenders, but I think they're right there next to them. But you also got other playoff contenders. And Penn State, there's a chance they could lose to Michigan and Ohio State. But we'll see. My 10th playoff contender, I have Alabama. They are definitely a playoff contender if they win out and beat Georgia. I don't see them missing the playoffs if they go undefeated the rest of the season. I'm going to just say that. And my last contender, I put North Carolina on here. I talked about it earlier. I swapped them with USC. They're my last playoff contender. I don't think it's that likely for them to make it. I mean, they'd have to go undefeated. I don't think they're going to make it with one loss. They'd have to go undefeated and beat Florida State. Can they do it? Probably. Maybe. I want to say probably. Maybe. I think Florida State is probably better than North Carolina, but who knows? Drake May's playing really good football right now, and their defense is improved. So, I mean, guess we'll have to wait and see. It's a fun season so far. I'm excited to see what happens the rest of the season, and I'm going to close out this video. Talked a lot in this video. I'm going to try to make my next college football video a preview of Week 8 in a couple days, so tune in for that. And peace out, guys. Have a nice day. Subscribe, like the video, comment, do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to hate you for not subscribing, but it'd be nice. Please subscribe. And goodbye.